Welcome to the Wayne Bennett podcast, celebrating West Virginia's people, places, and the culture of Southern Appalachia. Now here's your host, Wayne Bennett.
Welcome to Wayne Bennett's podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Bennett, and this is episode 160. It's March the 11th, 2025. And looks like it might be a nice spring day. It's not quite spring yet, though. But our guest today is a former athlete at Woodrow Wilson High School and Marshall University and the NFL. Played for the Steelers and the Chargers and the Buffalo Bills. And Mr. Doug Legursky, welcome, Doug.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, you know, the first time I ever heard or ever saw the name Doug Legursky, I was looking in the newspaper and I saw the B team champions from Southwest, and I think your dad was the coach, and you guys had won the championship, and there's several guys that I knew, Greg Schmidt, and some of those guys were coaching, and evidently you guys were. I think the next year you guys were won at Southwest, and but didn't your family live in North Carolina when you were younger?
Yeah, so I was born in Frankfurt, Germany, and I had a few years I lived at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. So my dad was 82nd Airborne, and so I grew up on a military base until he moved back home, got out of the military, and I moved here. I think halfway through my first grade year, really? So I moved back home, and so it was Beckley from there on out.
Now, there used to be a Legursky that was city police chief? Were you kin to him?
Yeah, correct. That's Carl Legursky. And so that's my grandfather.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then my brother now is the resource officer at Park Junior High and a Beckley City police officer. So that's runs in the family for sure.
Now I once read somewhere that you actually starting out like baseball better than you did football. How old were you when you got into sports?
Yeah, I guess, when I first moved back to Beckley, I remember just like everybody else, you play at Beckley Little League and you kind of do the basketball at the YMCA. I remember being my first basketball team, I had to wear a different jersey because I was too big for everybody else's jersey. So I had to wear like one with sleeves on it and playing at Beckley Little League. And I remember my dad, he said I needed to play football, and I never wanted to. I was more of a passive kid at that time. And he said, if you just try it out, if you don't like it after the first practice, like you don't have to play. And, I don't remember, but he said my eyes just lit up the first time I ever actually hit somebody. And basically he said from that point on, I was just hooked into it. So he forced me into it for at least one practice. And he said by that point, that was all she wrote on there.
Now, I did see you did play some baseball too, but you guys played for the Chip Keatley baseball team. Was that a Babe Ruth team or a
Yeah, the old Chippers. I think that was a Babe Ruth team. Somebody gave Nancy Kissinger, my mother-in-law, an envelope a couple years ago, and they said they were cleaning out their basement, and they found an old picture of that Chippers team, from 98 maybe, and all of us signed it and took a picture. So I played Little League, all through Little League baseball, up into Babe Ruth. And about that time, that's kind of when, you start to form, I just fell in love with football more than baseball. Yeah. And so I just started focusing more on that year round.
Now, Chip Keatley, I happen to know Chip. I was actually teaching and coaching at Woodrow when he was there. And he played football and basketball and baseball, and a tremendous athlete. And I never coached him. I actually never had him in class. I had his sister in class, but he would come down to my room, talk, all the time. And he went on down to Virginia Tech. And then I think he went to Dallas Cowboys and was on the practice squad for a while. But Chip died young. He had cancer and died I think he was in his late 20s or maybe early 30s. But a great guy. And I didn't even know they had a baseball team or league in his name. Now, when you played at Park, Who was Mike Ross your coach?
Yep.
Yeah.
Coach
And you
Ross.
played with Keith Barr in that much.
Yeah, so I didn't play with them until I got up to high school because they are older than me.
Oh, okay.
So even my 10th grade year, I didn't play my my 7th grade year at Park. And so I played my 8th grade year, my 9th grade year, and then 10th grade I got to play with those guys with their senior year. That was the 2001 year. We lost to Riverside in the playoffs that year, but we had a great team. It was Matt Morris, Keith Barr, Chase Maynard, Thomas Mitchell. Those guys were Shavar Greer. I mean, that was a solid team that we had that year. We had a chance to go all the way, and that's a solid group of guys that was on that team.
Wow, I forgot about that. Now you ended up playing with Darius Law in your last year. You were what, second team All-State when you were in high school?
Tell you the truth, I don't remember. First team in my senior year, second team my junior year.
Yeah.
And then I played with D Law, Antoine Sorrells, guys like that. A lot of guys that's on the Hall of Fame now. So we had some good players.
You ever try to wrestle?
You know what? Coach Surratt, I got a great story about that. So Coach Surratt tried to get me to wrestle my senior year. My playing weight was 315 to 317, and back then I don't know what it is now, but heavyweight was 275. You had to get down to 275. So he wanted me to come out and wrestle for him. He trusted me to drop the weight, and I got down. He started kicking my butt in that mat room, cranking the heat up. He would bring his brother Sean Surratt, who's now the head offensive line coach in Jacksonville. He would come. Ricky Fisher and Coach Powell, those three would come and kick my butt every day. And I'd wrestle those four guys. I started dropping weight pretty heavy. And, I'm going to Marshall by this point. I've already signed to Marshall. And I remember I got down to like 289. And he was like, we're right there, Doug, like just a few more pounds. And I remember like it was yesterday. It was my wife now, Megan. It was her sweet 16 birthday party. And they had Little Caesars pizzas. And I took down 2 of those $5 hot and readies. I took them down like it was nobody's business. And I went crying my eyes out to Coach Surratt. Just told him I couldn't do it, Coach. I was losing so much weight. I had Marshall coming up. Wrestling was never my sport. I'd never done it before then. And that was the only time I ever felt like I let him down. Now we look back and laugh at it. And he knew then. He was like, man, looking back, he says he shouldn't even pushed me to it. But that was one of those things where you try to do something and then eventually the $5 hot and readies took over and I broke.
Well, I know your brother John wrestled for me a little bit, and he wasn't very big in junior high, and then he got bigger after he got out of school. I think, I've
always told John he could have been a better athlete than me. He was. Even in baseball, he was a really good baseball player. Really fast at Southwest. Scored a lot of touchdowns for us. Scored. I think he only played 1 year park football, but even then was a great athlete. But just never fell into that athletic, mindset to continue on. But he's doing really well for himself right now.
I heard that in the neighborhood as you were growing up, that with the guys who playing a lot, saying a lot, this and that when you guys would box, they'd make you put your hand behind your back.
There's still an old video, a VHS video, because we used to video record ourselves beating each other up. But yeah, I got to the point where I forgot about that. Yeah, that's why you do that. We got to the point where they would make me do it with one hand if I would fight anybody, because they'd all fight each other and nobody would fight me, so I'd have to do it with one hand. There's a video somewhere, me and a couple of the guys I'd play with Park, we'd all go down because I lived right behind the junior high. And so we'd walk down to my house after practice and mess around for the rest of the day.
The neighborhood I grew up in, there was about 28 boys, I think, within 2 or 3 years of each other. And some of us older guys, every once in a while, when we needed some money, we had an old set of boxing gloves, couple pair, and we would pass the word around the neighborhood 2 guys were going to fight. There's these guys are mad, they're going to fight. And so we charged the little kids to come and watch.
Oh, that's a great system, yeah.
We really wasn't fighting. We split the money afterwards, but
it's a good tactic.
You got to be able to do it. But now, Coach Pruitt, Bob Pruitt, recruited you to Marshall. And Bob used to come up here and hang around a lot when you guys were playing. And Bob and I were we grew up in the same neighborhood. He was older than I was, but he was a guy that we always, as younger guys, looked up to. He ran track, he played football, he wrestled. Then he went to Marshall, and even to this day, I mean, we stay in touch. And Bob brought you in, and you started the first freshman year, didn't you?
Yeah, he brought me in. I remember him. I was in my junior year of football, and he called me and said, "This is Coach Pruitt." I said, "How you doing, sir?" He said, "You're from Beckley. I'm from Beckley. You're coming to Marshall." And I said, "Yes, sir." I remember that's how our conversation went. From that point on, I was going to Marshall. And so, I played my senior year out, always going to Marshall, and ended up starting my freshman year coming up there. And, I started out splitting time. And I remember my first play was against DeMarcus Ware. You remember DeMarcus Ware? He played for Dallas for many years. My first play against Troy State, they were Troy State at the time, I was at left guard, was against DeMarcus Ware. And they did a TE stunt. And he flew past me like just a streak. I didn't even see him for a sack fumble. My first play of college football. So basically, welcome to the big time, boy. Being 17 years old, I wasn't even 18 at the time. Wow. Playing against somebody that ended up that year being first round draft pick, 6 months later or 8 months later playing in the NFL. And that was the year that he got drafted. And so, of course, the highlight film of all of his draft day stuff was me on repeat, getting just totally blown up. And so that was a good awakening call for me to get my just keep on working. I hadn't made it yet.
What's the biggest you ever got when you were playing football?
Yeah, my biggest playing weight was probably 323.
Really?
That was playing weight. I got up to – I remember the year I blew my knee out. That off season, you sit around, you got a big busted knee, you can't run or anything. I got up to 330, and 339, just off season heavyweight. But then my playing weight, I really was comfortable around 317, 315 as a playing weight. That was always comfortable for me.
Now, what I know you were devoted to lifting. I mean, you were big in the weight room, and you had some state records in high school, and maybe still have. I don't know. But what was a bench press state record, or what?
I don't remember. You mentioned that I just fell in love with weightlifting. Like, that's such a huge part of football. Like, if you love the weight room, like, you can build on the field stuff. But very rarely you'll find somebody that's great on the field that doesn't love the weight room, unless they're the superior God-given athlete, Yeah. And so most of the time, and it's funny, when I went to Marshall, as soon as I came there, they were like, "Oh, that's a Beckley boy." Like, they lift different. So, like, by that time, Matt Morris was up there, Shavar Greer was up there, and they had set that standard where everybody in that locker room knew that a Beckley boy lifts different. Like, they live in the weight room. And, of course, I went up there and followed suit with them, and we just kind of – and that's the culture that, someone like Coach Surratt has built over in Beckley. Like, he was my offensive line coach, and he ran the weight program. Like, he built that culture of, like, you better eat that iron to be able to produce on the field. And so he definitely instilled that in us. And I think you're right. I won a state championship in powerlifting, but I couldn't even tell you the numbers. I remember the lifts and I remember the weights, but I couldn't even tell you. I remember my max was 405 in bench at one point, but I think that was at Marshall. So it's probably way less than that, especially at a meet where you have to it's kind of a more disciplined lift.
I worked at the Y when we were at the old Y, and then we moved down to what we call the new Y on East Main Street. And I started a weightlifting club, and not that I was a weightlifter, I was more of an organizer. But we had these guys that it really caught on big in Beckley. And we had a couple guys just got out of the military that had lifted and done some competition. James Ken Jimmy, and Mark Scott, and Mark Davis, and a guy named Randy Worley. But anyway, we started having competition. We'd have a bench press contest, and so the club kept getting bigger and bigger, and so then we started having some state competition. And I didn't really know there was that many power lifters around. We didn't do any Olympic lifts or anything, but we had the first couple of state high school competitions that was sanctioned by secondary schools. But all we did was the bench and the deadlift. We couldn't do squat and stuff back then. They wouldn't allow it, But so they just but it was and the high schools were just not everybody was lifting that much at that time. But it was pretty interesting. Well, we had the national YMCA competition at our Y. And these guys come in from everywhere. They come in from California and Minnesota and everything. And I never seen it. And back then, powerlifting was not part of the Olympics. So actually steroids were legal. Mm-hmm. And man, these guys come in, they were unbelievable.
It's back when lifting was real.
And there was one guy named Dave Waddington. I think he's still alive. But he squatted 930 pounds. And it scared me to see that much on a weight.
Yeah, you see that bar bend back.
And it had all these spotters around. And later, I don't know whether it was competition or what, but I guess it was. But look him up. He was supposedly the first guy who ever squatted 1,000 pounds.
Really?
And he was a monster. He probably was 450 pounds himself. They said he ate 3 dozen eggs for breakfast, and they told me when he came in, they said, first thing he'll start complaining about everything and all that. So he came in on Friday night. We're having a competition on Saturday, and he comes in. I don't like this. I don't like it. But he was a pretty good guy. That was just he was trying to get his head crazy. But I've never seen anything like it. I mean, it was amazing. But when I left the Y and went back into education, the thing just kind of dropped off, and I don't know anybody that even competes anymore other than high school kids. But now, when you were in high school, you also threw the shot at discus, and you placed third one year, and you're actually better in a shot than you were the discus, weren't you?
Yeah, I think I just did that. I really just did that my senior year, and I really enjoyed doing that. And I had Matt Morris's dad, Scott. I don't know if you know Scott Morris very well.
Scott wrestled for me.
Yeah. He's a Golden Gloves boxer. Like he's an athletic. He taught me how to throw shot put. Doing stuff my senior year to keep busy and keep in shape. And so we decided we wanted to all go out and throw a shot and disc. And Matt Morris, who's an incredible disc thrower, he taught me a little bit. And I never could really get the hang of the spin on the disc. I can do it functionally, but never could get my full power behind it. But shot put was a little bit easier for me. But, just like with anything, if you only do it that short amount of time, you're being able to be, very good at it is limited. I did have a funny story about that discus. You got the scratch ring. So if you walk into the circle, right, in the front, you get scratched. Yeah, and so you always have to walk into the back. And I remember we were at Laidley Field, one of the meets, and for some reason the coach, the person that was the judge there at the time, he had it out for Beckley guys. He would for some reason, he would always just give us the eyeball and was really rough on us. And, maybe that's just us in Beckley. We always think that from everybody. But I remember I walked into the rink really probably right at the halfway point, and he scratched me. And I'm like, what in the world? Like I've watched 15 people do the same thing, and I was like, all right. So the next time I get up, I go and I clearly make it being a smart aleck, walk right in the back, like all the way as far as you can. And he's standing right behind that cage, and I spin around real fast, and I accidentally, air quotes, let that disc slip off, boom, right in the cage, right in front of his face. Shatters that cage. And he almost falls on his butt. And boy, he looks at me like he tried to get me out of the whole tournament. Like, you're out. I was like, it just slipped out of my hands. Like, I'm 15, 16 years old, probably being a jerk. Well, that next one, I only have one throw left, my only actual throw. And that's, and I send it and I launch it out. And thank goodness I have a good throw and I didn't ruin my whole tournament. I forget what I ended up placing that one. That's just kind of the silly stuff you remember about discus as opposed to, the practices, the competitions and stuff. I remember.
I remember one thing about the shot put. I was coaching track at Park, and we'd go to Lately Field, and man, every time we got down there, we'd lose a daggone discus or a shot put or something, and I got on those guys like crazy, and I made a comment, and it was my fault, but I was getting on. So I said, man, every time we go somewhere, we got to buy another discus or a shot put or something, and we can't afford it. I said, you better come back with a shot put and a discus. I don't care whose it is. So we get back on the bus one day, and we're getting ready to pull out, and the bus pulls up and stops, and about 4 shot puts roll to roll up the aisle. And I said, oh, man. So we had to take those shots back and give them to whoever they belonged to.
Ain't getting caught without a disc. That's pretty good.
That your senior year, you actually tore your ACL in football and missed the last 3 games, but you still got the Hunt Award. I was kind of surprised that you got it because I don't think they give Beckley guys just anything. But you had earned it, and I mean, but because you had missed 3 games, I was a little surprised that you had. Were you surprised, or were you?
Yeah, I was surprised. I actually just tore my cartilage, my meniscus. It wasn't a full knee blow. So I tore my meniscus, and I went to the doctor, and it ended up getting repaired. It was repairable, and I did have a future in football, and so you could clean one of those out and miss 6 weeks. Well, that by the time the season would have been over anyway. So I went and got that repaired, but did have to miss the rest of the season. And yeah, I remember being pretty bummed out. I knew I had a shot for that award, and in high school that's a big deal to try to go for that. And I remember the day it came out, Coach Lilly called me and said, hey, you're getting this. And he said, but you can't tell anybody except for your dad. And I called my dad, and he was all excited. And I remember it was going to come out in the next couple of days, and I remember a bunch of people telling me, man, that's just sorry, man. That sucks that you got hurt. You would have had it for sure. And I remember thinking, I already do, but thank you for letting me know that, And it was when it did come out, it was very exciting. I was very happy that I was able to get the award for basically all the work that people have put into me. Coach Surratt worked endlessly with the weight room and in training, and the guys around me, that offensive line that helped me out all those times. Like, that was a team award, and that's the way we looked at it there. Like, that wasn't Doug Legursky. That was an offensive lineman of that year award, and for our offensive line to get recognized in a year that we had a tough season, that felt good for us.
Well, I think too, a lot of these running backs that get the awards, most of them do think the lineman, it wasn't going to happen without that.
Yeah.
And you can see how important linemen were in the Super Bowl this year. But the offensive line had a hard time on the Kansas City side.
Those Eagles looked dangerous, didn't they?
I know.
Goodness gracious, I was watching that. I was like, man, I'm glad I ain't playing right now. That looks tough.
But now you had. Later on in college, you were in the list for the Remington Award, which is center, I think, college center, and then the Lombardi Award, that's line.
Correct, yeah.
And you, I think, were second team All-State, second team All-Conference in your junior year and first team your senior year.
Uh-huh.
When did you start thinking about the pros? I mean, when do you thought maybe I can play another level?
Me and my wife, Megan, we've been together since we were 15, so like my journey is her journey. It's our journey. And it's really funny. So back up 1 second to the Southwest Bandits. I still have the Southwest Bandits helmet that's sitting on my mantle. And inside of it, I have written Doug Legursky, 11 years old, lifelong dream, Dallas Cowboys player. Like, I remember since I was a kid, the only thing I ever wanted to do was play in the NFL. Like, the only thing I ever want to do. What are you going to do when you grow up? I'm going to play in the NFL. Ha, ha, ha. What are you going to do after that? And I never had an answer, right? Like, I was dumb enough not to have an answer, or smart enough not to have another answer to keep pushing me. And And then by the time we got to college, and I don't know if it was me not being smart enough to plan in the future, or me and Megan just living in that moment, but we've tracked it back and thought about it. We had never once had a conversation about it. All I knew is who I got next week, and that's something that, in the NFL, that was it's a great gift that I had that already, but I never thought about it. I never thought like, I need to do this to make it there. I need to do this. All I knew is I need to stay in shape. I need to play as hard as I can, and I need to kick some butt when it's my job on the field. And if all that happens, then those pieces will take care of themselves. And then, it's a gift in some way and a curse in others. But I know if I work hard today, it'll pay off tomorrow, as opposed to worrying about if it will happen tomorrow or not. And that's just a tactic that I've just really was blessed with to have in football, because it really is a gift to kind of stay in that moment and focus on this week or focus on this practice and just try to get the best that you can at that moment. And if you do that enough times, then the future will take care of itself. And, me and her almost laugh about it now. It's like, we don't remember the conversation. Like, do you think you're going to make it or not make it? Or what if you don't make it? Like, we never had it. And it's pretty impressive. Probably dumb of us, but our parents would probably disagree with that.
Now, Coach Pruitt had left. Didn't he leave before you graduated?
Yeah, we only had 1 year under Coach Pruitt.
Oh, you only had 1 year?
Yeah, 1 year. And I remember that meeting that he let us know that he was leaving. And some of those seniors that, he brought out of some bad situations, some bad home lives, and that was their daddy up there.
Yeah.
And man, that was tough. That was the first time I ever felt that, like, that family breakup, like a team family, and that separation. And that was a tough time, especially for those older guys. Not as much for me, but for those older guys that they got 1 year left, and that's been their father figure for a number of years. So that was a wild experience to go through.
Now, when you got to Pittsburgh, Tomlin was coach, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
And what was your role? I mean, what did you know? When I don't even know how did they call a practice? It was a taxi squad, the practice squad. Is that what I used to call
squad.
A taxi?
Yeah. So I got I tell this story. Oftentimes, by the time my senior year at Marshall is over, hope you're getting ready for the draft. You're getting ready to hopefully I get drafted. Hopefully I get picked up by somebody. Let's see who wants me. And the draft came and went. But something that's, if you're outside of football, you don't kind of understand this. There's a feeding frenzy right after that for all the leftover boys, like all the almost just would have got drafted, or if they had one more pick, we would have picked you. All those players to fill these rosters. A team during the regular season is 53 men. Well, an off-season roster is like 75, so that's 25, give or take, a team, once you count like injured reserve guys and things like that you can carry, for 16 teams. So that's a lot of players that get picked up, and I was one of those players that got picked up in Pittsburgh. And I got cut 2 times before the regular season even started. And then, so I got cut.
Now, this was 2009?
This would have been 2008 season,
okay.
So like into 2009. Yeah. So I got brought in right after the draft, which is OTAs, like spring ball, and I got cut before training camp. I got brought back into training camp after an injury, and I got cut again right before regular season, and then I got brought back in during regular season. And I spent the next 5 years there. So that first time I got brought back into regular season would have been for practice squad.
When you get cut, though, doesn't it work on your head? I mean, do you go through depression?
Oh, my God. Well, the first time, this is true Steelers faction, man. They cut me on the 4th of July. I was ready to go to Black Knight, hang out at the pool party 4th of July. I'm going to the Steelers here in 12 days for training camp. And they called me that morning and cut me. Ruined my 4th of July, but it worked out all right. But yeah, it's a devastating feeling, but man, it fuels you. I remember thinking, I forget if it was that cut or the next cut. I went and visited my sister. Her husband's in the Air Force, and I went to the base, and she had a couple of young daughters at that time, and I was, helping her with the kids and stuff, and I was working out in her front yard, just with old rusty dumbbells that they had, and sprinting down her road. And she's a CrossFitter, so she was always loving that workout stuff. And I remember having the conversation with her husband, like, hey, the military, what's this military life looking like if this doesn't work out? And I remember thinking, man, I hope I just get a chance. And, looking back on it, it's scary is what it is, how thin the line is between never have made it and me, for example, had an 8-year career. Yeah. That line is razor thin between those two shots. It was one injury here, one stance there, and the hand of God was guiding me through that whole time. Like, it was just a blessing that those things happened the way they did for me to get a shot. And when that shot came, I had prepared myself for it. And that's a big thing that I try to teach these young kids now that I'm coaching is, you don't know when that shot's coming, man. And if you're not ready for it, it's going to pass you by and go to somebody else that has been preparing. And, I was lucky enough and blessed enough with enough good coaches and my dad pushing me and good players around me that I was ready for that situation when it happened.
Now, I heard somebody say one time that had played on the line in the NFL, and he said if his son came along and wanted and had the size and the ability to play football, he would teach him this long snap.
That's not a bad theory, yeah.
He said that you don't have to be the greatest if you can snap, you can place a ball somewhere.
That's true, yeah. Everybody's looking for a good long snapper. Yeah. Well, it's like before my draft, my pro day, which is it's like a college level combine. Mike Bartram, who was a long snapper in the NFL for 16 years, went to Marshall. He came down and trained me just a long snap, just so I can get it enough to get 5 or 6 snaps in practice. In front of the scouts, just to be able to put it on my resume as one more thing. So if you can be a backup offensive lineman and you can long snap, then you're more of an asset than somebody that couldn't do that.
When they first signed you, you weren't married. You got married in March, didn't you?
Yeah, it would have been right after we won the Super Bowl. Yeah, so we won the Super Bowl in February.
Okay.
So like the Super Bowl 43. It was in early February of 2009. Okay. And then, I got married that next month.
No, was Roethlisberger there at that time?
Yeah, Ben. Yeah, Roethlisberger.
What kind of guy is he?
He was a competitor, I'll tell you that much. Man, no matter what that guy does, I don't know if you've ever been around anybody, but like whatever it is, it's a competition and they always usually win. It's like he's like that. So he was a heck of a competitor, and man, talk about a quarterback on the field that'll play hard for you and stuff, man. He was fun to block for. Sometimes I wish he'd get rid of that ball faster and make it a lot easier on us up front. But that style of play, man, it definitely wins some ball games. And for him to be, as tough on the field as he was, that made it that much more of a pleasure to try to fight for him up front.
I saw him on Pat McCaffrey's show yesterday.
Oh,
he looked good, man. He looked really good.
Oh, he's probably got his golf game dialed in right now. He loved him some golf.
I think he was complaining a little bit about his shoulder a little bit, but he was, but he looked good. He was making a few predictions here and there. But now you were there for 5 years, 6 years at
Yep, I was in Pittsburgh for
And so then the first game you ever started was in the Super Bowl, wasn't it?
No, that was the first game I ever started at center.
Oh.
Yeah, so I'd started a whole season at guard.
Okay.
Then I was a swing guy for a year, and then I was the backup center for a couple of years, and I played plenty of games at center, but I never had a center start. So that's only one of those things where they're looking for headlines at the Super Bowl. He's never started at center. The first start, And I'm like, I've been a starter for 2 years. No one's cared because it's at guard. So
the penalty was the center.
Yeah.
He got hurt.
Correct. Yeah, he got hurt. And that's a story. We were playing the Jets in the AFC Championship game, and this is the Rex Ryan defense Jets. Like, they were running packages. So as an offensive lineman, to explain a little bit, as an offensive lineman and a center, you have to identify what kind of defense they're in. Are they in a 4 down front, a 3 down front? How many defensive backs do they have? based upon those packages that they run, they have different blitzes and things that they do. So that's like the game within the game. Like you have to know what we're running against what they're running and what they do, which would tell us how we need to block it, right? So you have to identify all those things. And so like base personnel would be like 7 big guys and 4 defensive backs, right? A nickel would be 5 defensive backs, right? But then you get into dime, which is 6 defensive backs, and they ran quarter, which is like you just like 1 more defensive back and 1 more less big guy. It just basically makes it a nightmare to try to identify. And so like logistically, you had to study and get a lot of reps at seeing it during the week, which Pouncey going into the AFC Championship game took all those reps, right? Because I'm a backup. I just get to play here and there. And so he got to see all that live and get all those reps and build that muscle memory and try to see all that and diagnose it with the guys and with the offense and get that practice. In the first series, he pops his ankle. All right, Doug, get in there. Oh. I was like, oh, no, all right, I'm going to do it. And, again, it's one of those things where I could have sat on my hands and, hey, I'm the backup. I'll just figure it out. But I was always that person that, like, if I get my shot, man, I don't want to be the one that screws it up for everybody. And so I was, again, it's one of those instances where, I got thrown in there and I was ready to go. And through one of the craziest defensive, games that I've ever been a part of and try to have to diagnose on the run. And I had a really good game. And then, that went even into the Super Bowl game where I had a really good game as well. We didn't win that. We didn't win it, but it's one of those games.
I saw the Packers play that year. I think they played the first game with the Redskins. I went to that game. I'm a Redskins fan, and the Redskins actually beat them, and then the Packers won the Super Bowl that year. But then,
got you a moral victory there. Yeah, See the Redskins, you could have done it. Yeah.
But then you went to San Diego, and then you went to Buffalo. Did you take
Buffalo first? Buffalo.
Oh, you went to Buffalo first. Did you have a family at that time?
Yeah. So my last year in Pittsburgh, we had my oldest, Trip. He's Wayne Douglas Legursky, the third. I'm the second. He's the third. So I'm a Wayne too. If you didn't know, so I got a bunch of Waynes running around.
Wayne means wagon maker. So just don't forget.
Oh, there you go. I'll have to tell him. And so I had him at that point, and we went to Buffalo, and he was, one playing in Buffalo, and I had a 2-year contract there. In my second year, I was released right before regular season of my second year. At that time, he was 1. My wife was pregnant. We had a house in Pittsburgh. We had a townhouse in Buffalo. She has a baby, pregnant, has a dog and a cat, and I fly out to San Diego. So she got a house in Pittsburgh, condo in Buffalo, all that family. I'm in San Diego in a hotel room trying to learn a playbook in a week because we were playing the Jets in 5 days, and I have to learn the playbook because I'm the starting center out of a playbook that's about a phone book's thick. Wow. And poor Megan has to catch up all those pieces. She finally gets out to San Diego, right? We're there for 2 weeks, and I blow my knee out. So now we have a house in Pittsburgh, a place in Buffalo we're trying to get rid of, a place in San Diego, and I'm flying back to Pittsburgh to have surgery. And it's just sometimes that's one of those storms that happens in life. And there's a lot of puzzle pieces behind the front story of, Doug's injured and, he has to have surgery, lost the season. There's a lot.
You have to have family support for sure. And,
there's a lot of life that happens there.
Besides your family, you married into the Kissinger family. That's a remarkable family. I mean, I know Nancy Kissinger and her husband, Richard, they have done so much in the community, and I mean, gosh, just the energy, and your wife has run United Way. She had you involved in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, well, it's like Nancy and Megan are just this power women of this community, and it's really nice to watch them go out and fight for the growth of Beckley. And Nancy does a great job. We have a few meetings even today with some things that we want to do in Beckley and trying to improve things on. And she's always been great. And Megan's been such a rock there while I was playing. And now that I've retired, she's been able to do her work towards her goals as a business. She was at the United Way. Now she's a financial advisor now and is really trying to strive in that. And to have those strong women in the community, in the family, it takes a lot off of my plate. And I don't have to pay no bills. Those women got those checks figured out.
Well, now, when you got cut from San Diego, did you know that was over? It was.
Well, so in San Diego, I blew my knee out. And so that was just a 1-year contract. And so, went back to Pittsburgh. I had surgery with the Pittsburgh doctors that I was comfortable with. And right then, that's where you start asking your questions. So I was 7 years into the NFL, not under contract, and just had a knee surgery. So that's the writing's on the wall, so to speak. But that's one of those situations too, where I can just kind of roll over and die and say, this is probably it. Or I was like, well, I might as well keep on working, right? And just see what happens. And, I guess it's sitting here as I say this, it's kind of the first time I've realized it, that's a recurring theme, that if I just keep on working, something good will happen. Because, I decided I wasn't just going to retire. I was going to get back in shape. I might as well, right? Who wants to, just gain 40 pounds from a knee surgery? I was going to get back in shape. I was going to keep working out, and I was going to get back to physically able to play ball. And, that year was the year that, I don't know if that was the year that DeCastro or somebody in Pittsburgh got hurt, and I got the call. Doug, are you healthy? I was, yes, sir, I'm healthy. I'll come show you how healthy I am. And I got to go back to Pittsburgh for my last season. So I did my 5 years in Pittsburgh, went to Buffalo, went to San Diego, had an injury, and I got to go back to Pittsburgh for my last year. And, that was a beautiful thing. And, I was under a 1-year contract. I had to have hand surgery after that season. So coming off of a knee, have to have hand surgery. I had a disc issue. Under a year contract, I'm already 8 years in the NFL, and the writing was kind of on the wall after that it was probably no one else is going to pick up that phone. And, I was okay with that. I had a good career, and I got to end it in Pittsburgh where, we had a nice base set up, and it was close to home, and it was a good ending for my career.
Did you come back to Beckley after you left Pittsburgh?
Yeah, well, we stayed in Pittsburgh. One thing funny about Pittsburgh, and other NFL teams are not like this. So I've been around a few. Most people, when the season's over, they go back to their hometown, or when their career's over, they're out of there. And Pittsburgh was different. Pittsburgh, man, a lot of those guys stayed around. A lot of those old Steelers, go to their kids go to North Allegheny High School right now, which is the big high school up there, and they all just stayed around. So we did the same. We felt comfortable in Pittsburgh. We had bought a place back home that we can come and visit and stay a lot more. We'd spend more and more time down here, but we set up base, and we were up there for another 2 years before me and Megan almost simultaneously. Like every time we came back home and we started driving back up 19 North, our hearts would just sink. Like, gosh, what are we like? Why are we going north again? And finally we just kind of, just one of those things where we're on the same page at the same time, just looked at each other and said, like, let's raise our babies back home. And, heck, if you would have told me when I was in high school that somebody else was from Pittsburgh, I would have looked like they were like, had 3 heads. And, I didn't want my kids to be Pittsburgh kids. I wanted them to be Beckley kids. And so we wanted to come back home and raise our kids here. And it's been the best decision that we've made. It's coming back home and getting plugged into this community. And
of course, when you come back home, people recognize you, and they'll use you to a certain extent because you've done camps and clinics, and you spoke at dinners. You've done a lot of giving back, and that's important to the community. You might be the only native West Virginian that's got 2 Super Bowl rings. You ever thought about that?
I only got 1.
I thought you had 2.
We won 43, but we lost Super Bowl 45. I've been in 2.
Oh, okay.
But we lost 1. One of those is an AFC Championship watch, which drives me nuts.
Oh.
But speaking of the only West Virginian,
Lonnie Warwick
Lonnie.
And but I thought you got 2 even, I thought you got a Super Bowl ring even if you play. I mean, if you were
If you lost,
the team played in it.
No, you only get that championship watch.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I'm learning.
Yeah.
Not that I'll ever win one, but now you have been honored yourself, like you mentioned before. I mean, you besides all the awards that you won or were mentioned at when you were playing. You're in the Woodrow Wilson Football Hall of Fame. You even had a sandwich named after you up at Calisina.
That's my greatest honor.
The Big Legursky.
Yeah, that's my greatest honor.
Is it still available?
Oh yeah. Dude, my kids will tear that up. It'll feed the whole family. That thing's great. Yeah.
I'll have to take somebody with me up there and try that. I knew you had that. Your son he's playing a little sports now. I think he played football and wrestled some, didn't he?
Yeah, he played football and wrestled for Park, and he's throwing shot put and discus for him now too.
Wow, that's great.
So he's coming up the ranks. My daughter Millie, she plays volleyball at the Y, and she just started softball out here at Beckley Little League. My youngest Tucker, he's doing soccer. He's a big soccer fan.
So your job is taking kids to practice.
Oh my goodness gracious!
Matches and games.
My schedule's filled up. Most of it's with figuring out when practice is.
But you've also taken on the role of your home school. You're coaching the line at Woodrow Wilson High School, and you guys had success this past year, and you got some. I've seen you guys out there. Some of the guys out there at 5:00 in the morning, 3 days a week, and I mean, wow! I'm just impressed. It's something else.
Well, thank you. I mentioned it earlier, Coach Surratt, and what he instilled in me when I was coming up through. Man, he's still infusing that into players now. And for me to come back and join beside him to try to do that to this next generation has been really fulfilling. And like you said, we were out there at 5:00 this morning pushing sleds on the frosty turf and just trying to build kids up, trying to build them up mentally, build them up physically. And we had a parent meeting, and I was just trying to speak from the heart, and I told these parents, I said, we're going to be tough on your kids. Like, it's not for everybody. We're going to be tough on them because my job, I feel like, is to get them ready for life. And, people like that are a little bit older know that life will kick your teeth out. Life will pull the rug out from underneath you, and you've got to be able to get back up and fight. If you don't fight, man, you're going to get taken into deep water and drown. It's like, so I'm preparing your kids for life and to win a state championship along the way. And that's the way, like, I get goosebumps just thinking that way, because I think that's what I feel like is sometimes missing, is, especially in the coaching world, is the only thing we care about is winning ball games. But like, man, I want these kids to be successful no matter what they do. And if you teach them how to fight at, getting up in the morning, getting their butts in here with a good attitude and fighting even if they're tired, man, that's a skill that'll last no matter where you go. It'll last on Friday nights. It'll last on Saturdays if they play, and it'll last in the coal mines, and it'll last if you're a teacher. It'll last anywhere. That mindset that you have to try to build in these kids, that tough times ain't going to go away, but you can make them a lot harder if you're lazy and weak. You can make them a lot easier if you're strong and dedicated. And that's what we've been trying to, I think that's our core message that we're trying to instill in these kids.
You ever see yourself trying to be a head coach?
Ooh, no. Not really.
Chad Pennington, he's doing pretty good down in Kentucky.
He is doing good. I have so much faith in Coach Surratt and, the program that he's built, and I've never seen someone more dedicated to a school. He doesn't like to talk about it. He's up at 3 a.m. He shuffles 8-10 kids in from people that don't have transportation into practice every day. Wow. He's just up there. We make food for the kids every day. So there's about 35, 40 that are training with us. Usually during the season, we'll have about 60. We have a meal for them every single day that they're with us, either working out or practice. We have a meal for them. And it's not, 2 hamburger patties and a slice of bread. Like, we have a full 800 calorie meal for them to get. Maybe that's the only meal they'll have that day. And so, that just shows what kind of coach that he is and who I'm working behind.
Yeah, we had him. He was here before talking with us, and there's nobody works any harder than the streets are at. And there's nobody that's any better character-wise, or as far as I'm concerned. But now, let's talk about Pittsburgh Steelers a little bit. Yesterday, they picked up DK Metcalf, and they picked up Darius Slay on defense. But they got the Fields, the quarterback, I think is going to the Jets. And I don't know who the quarterback's going to be for sure. Mm-hmm. They even mentioned, which I hope they don't do this, but they even mentioned that Aaron Rodgers might end up at Pittsburgh. But I just feel like Aaron Rodgers has had his best years. He would be a great mentor for a young quarterback, but I'm not sure that's the role he wants to take. But is Pittsburgh your favorite team?
Yeah, Pittsburgh's the team I spent the most time in. Is the team that we built a home base there with, and I still communicate even with some of the management people in Pittsburgh, and so it's definitely my favorite team. Most people are surprised to know that I really do not watch football anymore, other than the tape that our boys do. The only game I watched this past season was the Super Bowl, just because I was having people over and me and the kids were watching it.
Yeah.
There's times I get a glimpse of wanting to check out what's going on, but I've been so much involved in the high school level of football and just the intricacies of that. I really haven't kept up with the NFL, to be honest.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Now, your name is recognizable, and has anybody ever approached you about politics?
No. No, I'm not sure. I think I'm maybe too rough around the edges for something like that.
Well, you never know.
You never know, yeah.
It's like the role, I will not run if nominated, will not serve if elected, type thing. But what's on your bucket list? I know, you're wrapped up in the football now, and that does take a lot of time. There's no off season really, but is there something on your bucket list that you would like to do that you haven't done?
That's a good question. I kind of think, that just brought me back to what I was saying kind of about, my mindset in college is, that I looked to the future, the NFL, what we're going to do, and I was just kind of working on today. I'm in this moment right now where, my kids are young, and I'm really dedicated to giving them the best childhood I can and the most exposure to things that I can. I'm excited about the growth that Beckley football has made in my time in that. We're expanding a little bit. I don't know if you've heard yet about the Beckley football youth team that we're starting. And so we're kind of growing in that way. There's another situation that I'm in right now. We're trying to bring a sports complex to Beckley that would do basketball, volleyball tournaments and bring people from around the state and around this side of the country in. And so there's definitely this, talk about a bucket list of, these big dreams that I have. It's just for Beckley to thrive, to survive and thrive and to grow in a positive way. I think for a long time, there's been a lot of people would just to see Beckley not change.
Yeah.
And I believe that if it doesn't change, it'll eventually die. And so, my biggest thing is just to be present in that and, be hopeful in that and be prayerful in that and to try to see Beckley move in a positive way. And, in my part of life, that's a sports mindset, that's a football sports mindset. And how can we help the community through and the growth of kids through athletics? Because I think, just as I'm sure a lot of people think that there are every lesson in life you can learn through something on a field or on a court or in a weight room. You can learn every lesson you need to learn through those battles that you face.
I was at the state wrestling tournament this past weekend. I was telling my wife as we were walking in what's called Marshall Health Arena now, but I said, Beckley needs something like this. The Armory was built in 1961, 62. It only houses maybe 1,800 people, whatever. It might, boxing matches or something might hold a few more, but we need something at least will hold 12,000 people, to have concerts and sports events and things like that. Or, and then you look at some of the needs like, Little League baseball. They're still playing on the fields that I played on 60 some years ago, and they flood in the spring. There's no room for expansion hardly. They need to move the field somewhere a little higher up that's got more room to expand, more fields, those kind of things. Shady Spring Little League is playing at Beckley Little League because they have no place to play. I mean, we gotta do better. And there's I don't know what all the answers are, but I'm glad that there's people thinking about that kind of stuff. And one of my favorite sayings is to give anything less than your best is to sacrifice the gift. And you haven't definitely not. You're not sacrificing the gift. You're doing some great things, and I'm glad you came back to Beckley, and you're making Beckley proud. And I'd like to get you back on here sometime. You can tell us a little bit more about the. Well, I'll tell you what. You mentioned the youth football. Let's talk about the youth football just a second.
Yeah.
Beckley has Southwest, and they have East Beckley that just started a few years ago. And you were going to start at the Flying Eagle. Will that dissolve the other two teams, or will you? Hopefully, they all get. Are there enough kids for three teams, or do you think it'll all come into one, or what do you think?
My ultimate vision is to band all of Beckley together under one youth team.
Okay.
Just how Shady does, in the future. I'm a Southwest Bennett. I grew up, I told you earlier the story about I still have the helmet on my mantle. Back when I played it was Southwest East, and we had North Beckley too. I think the evolution of the youth sports here has led to a less than perfect system right now, to where it's gotten away from some what it started out being. The product that is coming up into the middle school levels isn't the same product as we would hope for. That was coming from somebody. I was the park coach 2 years ago. Even in high school levels right now, we're having players that come in that don't know how to stand. They don't know their stance. They don't know how to get in the huddle. They don't know basic terminology of football, the number system, the whole system, the player system, and things like that. And, that's something that starts from the ground up. I coached for Southwest 2 years ago. My youngest played a year. I'm not saying anything against those systems that are in place right now. I do know there are some issues there with both of those systems, both with finding people to run them and players and things. And, we've looked at that and discussed with both of those coaches. Now, whether or not those teams are going to fold anyway, or they were going to or not, I'm not 100% sure. But I do know that, I've searched my heart, and I've spoken with a lot of people, and me and Coach Surratt felt like the best thing that we can do for the youth of Beckley is to start a top-notch program that is built from the ground up with good people, good coaches, and a good umbrella of upper management of business and sports people alike in the community, to give these kids the best chance to be successful in football and eventually in life, and to give our middle school teams the best product that we could possibly give them. So you look at a system like a Bridgeport's a good example, that they have, let the high school coach, the middle school coach, and the youth coach are all on the same page, and they build a kid with a trajectory of success. By the time that kid is a senior, they have heard the same system, the same terminology, and been coached the same way for 12 years. Now think about that product of a senior that's been through that for 12 years, as opposed to restarting every 2-3 years with different tactics, different ways, different terminologies. And so eventually long-term goals, man, that's a beautiful thing I think we can organize here in Beckley, where all of these systems are under head coach, and it's not Park versus Beckley Stratton, and it's not East Beckley versus Southwest. Man, it's Beckley versus West Virginia. It's Beckley versus the world. And Park and Beckley Stratton, those games are important, but they're important to build skills and build a rivalry for us to move up to the next level to play for a state championship and to bring state championships back to Beckley. And I think you can do that on every level. You can do that at baseball. You can do that at basketball, and build a community where all these coaches and all these players are all on the same trajectory to bring championships to Beckley.
Now, Martinsburg, which is top tier in West Virginia in football, they don't even have a middle school program.
That's right.
They do a youth program up until the 9th grade, and then and whatever they're doing, people need to pay attention to.
Right.
Yeah. And my sons up at Culpeper, Virginia, their youth program, their rec program I was very impressed with. I mean, my grandson played on this one team, and the coaching staff, I think 4 of them played college ball Division I. I mean, those guys were unbelievable coaches, man. I mean, I was what they were doing was unbelievable. But I agree with you. You know, I think in the past, and I played for East Beckley back in the early 1960s, and back then we had a north, south, east, west, and bowling edition teams from Beckley.
And bowling edition had their own team. Wow.
The bowling edition was had a lot of kids back in that area that time. But I agree. Now it seems like there's not near as much teaching or the right kind of teaching. It seems like sometimes I've seen, not recently, but I've seen some of the youth have sign-ups. They practice 2 weeks and they start playing. You know, I thought, 2 weeks? You know, how do you get kids that didn't even know how to put a helmet on 2 weeks ago? And I think we kind of neglected the teaching process. But I hope what you guys are after, I hope you're successful with it, and good luck. And like I said, anytime you want to get back on here, we'd love to have you. I thank you for coming, and I've enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah, I've enjoyed this too. Anytime you want me back, you got my number. Give me a call. I'll be here. I'll chat all day, man. I'm pretty. You can tell I'm pretty long-winded on some of these things. I really enjoy talking to you.
Well, anybody else out there that would like to be on our show, you can contact me at awbennett50@gmail.com, and we'll get you on here. And remember, if you're not dead yet, you're not done yet. And God bless you.